Before we start the video, here's an announcement. I'll be going to London and to Paris over the next 2 weeks. On November 2nd, I'll be taking part in the Battle of Ideas, joining two panels, one on the question of whether social media helps or hurts the development of democracy, and the other on the question of socialism and the depth of its popularity. Then on November 3rd, Zero Books will be hosting a conversation on technology and the prospects for the left at the Newspeak House. Participants will include Angie Speaks, Chris Nynam, David Swift, and several others. Then in Paris, there will be a book launch event for What is Postmodern Conservatism at Noir, which, according to Time Out magazine, is a slice of Anglo-American literary culture in the heart of Paris. If you're in London or Paris, come out to join us. Links to these events will be in the video description. Hello Zero Books readers, it's me again, Douglas Lain, and in this video I'll be defending Slavoj Zizek from the charge of being a racist reactionary charlatan, which was recently made in the magazine Current Affairs. This video mostly actually focuses on the charge that Zizek is a charlatan when it comes to philosophy. It's a charge that's not very different from the allegations that are made about philosophy in general by people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Richard Dawkins.
Early 20th century philosophers had material contributions to make to the physical sciences. Pretty much after quantum mechanics, remember the philosopher is the would-be scientist but without a laboratory, right? And so what happens is the 1920s come in, we learn about the expanding universe in the same decade as we learn about quantum physics, each of which falls so far out of what you can deduce from your armchair that the whole community of philosophers that previously had added materially to the thinking of the physical scientists were rendered essentially obsolete.
But the allegations about Zizek's politics, the idea that he's a reactionary, is probably the more serious charge that's in the Current Affairs piece. And I did cover it in the original script for this video. I went through a number of the allegations one at a time in the original script, but when I started editing it together as a video, it just was too long and unwieldy. So what I'm going to do is make that original script available, probably posting it on Medium. I'll link to it in the description, and I'll leave this video as a defense of Zizek's philosophy. The most important thing to understand about the piece entitled What is Zizek For by Thomas Moller-Nielsen is that it is a gish gallop. What's a gish gallop? Here's a quote from Carl Aviani writing about Trump for Quartz magazine that defines the term. A gish gallop is a well-established method of outmaneuvering rhetorical opponents with an overwhelming onslaught of dubious arguments. The gallop works by leveraging two basic tendencies in human reasoning. First, it's easier and faster to make a false claim than it is to disprove one. Second, if an opponent fails to disprove every single one of the spurious statements you state, you can claim victory on the leftovers. Now, if I were to refute every claim made in this essay, this video would stretch out to the length of a feature film, so I'm not going to do that. Still, it is possible to offer a critique of this essay, despite its inherent fallaciousness, and we should start where the essay starts, namely with this quote from Astor Taylor's 2005 film, simply entitled, Žižek!
What would be my, how should I call it, spontaneous attitude towards the universe? It's a very dark one. The first thesis would have been a kind of total vanity. There is nothing, basically. I mean it quite literally. Like, ultimately there are just some fragments, some vanishing things. If you look at the universe, it's one big void. But then how do things emerge? Here, I feel a kind of spontaneous affinity with quantum physics, where, you know, the idea there is that universe is a void, but a kind of a positively charged void. And then particular things appear when the balance of the void is disturbed. And I like this idea spontaneously very much, that the fact that it's not just nothing, things are out there. It means something went terribly wrong. That what we call creation is a kind of a cosmic imbalance, cosmic catastrophe, that things exist by mistake. And I'm even ready to go to the end and to claim that the only way to counteract is to assume the mistake and go to the end. And we have a name for this. It's called love. Isn't love precisely this kind of a cosmic imbalance? I was always disgusted with this notion of I love the world, universal love. I don't like the world. I don't know how I'm somewhere in between. I hate the world or I'm indifferent towards it. But the whole of reality, it's just it. It's stupid. It is out there. I don't care about it. Love for me is an extremely violent act. Love is not I love you all. Love means I pick out something and it's, you know, it's again this structure of imbalance. Even if this something is just a small detail, a fragile individual person, I say I love you more than anything else. In this quite formal sense, love is evil.
After presenting us with this quote, Moller-Nielsen asks us to judge it intuitively. He offers us a multiple-choice test wherein our answer will determine not the truth about Zizek's monologue, but rather the truth about what kind of person we are in relationship to Zizek. Here are the choices. A. Zizek's monologue conveys something profoundly insightful. B. Zizek's monologue is insane gibberish. Or C. Zizek's monologue is confusing. It may contain insight, but it could be unbridled lunacy posing as philosophical profundity. From my perspective, the correct answer to this pop quiz would be C. Zizek's monologue is confusing. It may contain insight, but it could be unbridled lunacy. According to Moller-Nielsen, Zizek's ruminations on the universe are unhinged and insane. And for this reason, he doesn't even attempt to interpret or refute Zizek's monologue. Instead, he claims that the monologue is worthless because Zizek himself is a repetitive, racist reactionary. Moller-Nielsen's argument against Zizek's monologue is fallacious. Specifically, it's an example of an ad hominem fallacy. Readers of Ben Burgis's Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, know that an ad hominem fallacy is the logical mistake in reasoning we make when we take vile person P believes conclusion C to be a reason to reject conclusion C. For instance, if we say Richard Spencer supports universal health care and opposes U.S. airstrikes in Syria, therefore it is wrong to support universal health care or oppose U.S. airstrikes in Syria, we're committing the ad hominem fallacy. Again, the argument that Zizek's statements about the nature of love are incoherent or insane because Zizek is reactionary, racist, and repetitive is a fallacious argument. Further, the fact that Moller-Nielsen resorts to this fallacy at the very start of his essay is evidence that he is not interested in Zizek's ideas at all. The aim is to do damage to Zizek's reputation and not to refute his political stances or philosophical arguments. Nonetheless, I think it's worthwhile to take a moment to interpret what Zizek is saying about love, and for me, the best way to understand it is to consider a Facebook post that my mother-in-law recently shared. Here it is. It's not your job to detox toxic people. It's your job to detox the part of you that resonates with their toxicity. In Zizek's book, First as Tragedy, Then as Farce, he considers why it is that the topic of toxic subjects became popular in the late aughts. After describing several examples of how the ideology of toxicity plays out in our politics, including an example wherein Tunisian fishermen were put on trial in Sicily for aiding and abetting illegal immigrants after the fishermen had saved the immigrants from certain death, from drowning. Žižek claims that Agamben's notion of homo sacer, the one excluded from the civil order who can be killed with impunity, is fully operative in the heart of the very Europe that sees itself as the ultimate bastion of human rights. Žižek asserts that the answer to the impulse to exclude the other as toxic is not to insist that the other is innocent or that the other is non-toxic. It is rather to see the toxicity in yourself. Zizek's monologue on love points out the obvious, if uncomfortable, truth that even our most noble impulses and feelings occurs through the unjustifiable privileging of one person over all others. The immense power of fossil fuels are derived from prehistoric calamities. The very fact of our existence itself is a result of, as Žižek would put it, a cosmic imbalance. To return to the toxic people mean, it at first appears to be a loving message, a message of healing, but it is predicated on the idea that a non-toxic identity in life can be had. Another way to understand the problem is to think of what Žižek says about New Age or permissive fathers.
Could I give you just an example? For example, authority.
Okay.
Okay. Let's say you have a good old-fashioned father. It's Sunday afternoon. You have to visit grandma. The father, good old-fashioned authoritarian father, will tell you, listen, I don't care how you feel if you're a small kid, of course. I don't care how you feel. You have to go.
You're going.
Going grandmother and behave there properly.
Okay.
That's good. You can resist. No, nothing is broken. But let's say you have this so-called tolerant postmodern father. What he will tell you is the following. You know how much your grandmother loves you, but nonetheless, you should only visit her if you really want to. Now, every child who is not an idiot, and they are not idiots, know that this apparent free choice secretly contains an even much stronger order. It's not only you have to visit your grandmother, but you have to like it. So
I'm beginning to like this book all the more.
That's one example of how apparent tolerance, choice, and so on can conceal a much stronger order.
So we should go back to more like the dad that just says, "'Cause I said so."
Absolutely. It's more honest.
When considered again, in light of Zizek's observations, we can see that this meme, which is meant to be healing and helpful, is instead totalitarian in the worst sense. Not only are we to stamp out the toxic other, we are to stamp out the toxicity in ourselves. But this toxicity is precisely where our humanity, our subjectivity, resides. Now, I won't defend Zizek's tendency to self-plagiarize and repeat himself, but I will take a stab at addressing the claim that Zizek's philosophical writings are the works of a charlatan. Moller-Nielsen gives us this quote: "Here is the formula of less than nothing at its most elementary. Moving is a striving to reach the void. Namely, things move. There is something instead of nothing. Not because reality is in excess in comparison with mere nothing, but because reality is less than nothing. This is why reality has to be supplemented by fiction, to conceal its emptiness." Moller-Nielsen then asks us if we are confused. He says, "I'm certainly confused. How can something exist and yet simultaneously nothing exist? Or rather, less than nothing exist? Furthermore, who or what is supplementing reality by fiction if less than nothing exists? Does Zizek exist? If he doesn't, or if he doesn't even not exist, then who the hell wrote the book I'm reading? What's more, who the hell is reading it?" I'll try to answer these questions. How can something exist and yet simultaneously nothing exist? Well, dialectically. That is, the concept of being as per Hegel implies the concept of nothing or nothingness. For there to be the concept of being, there must be the concept of nothing. In The Science of Logic, Hegel wrote, Being, pure being, without any further determination, in its indeterminate immediacy, it is equal only to itself. It is also not unequal relatively to another. It has no diversity within itself, nor any with a reference outwards. It would not be held fast in its purity if it contained any determination or content which could be distinguished in it, or by which it could be distinguished from another. It is pure indeterminateness and emptiness. There is nothing to be intuited in it, if one can speak here of intuiting. Or it is only this pure intuiting itself, just as little as anything to be thought in it. Or it is equally only this empty thinking. Being the indeterminate immediate is in fact nothing, and neither more nor less than nothing. Now, Žižek would say perhaps that it is less than nothing, but Hegel isn't an easy philosopher to grasp, and a little context is necessary here. Hegel is post-Kantian. He's not starting from a position of simple realism, but is starting from the perspective of transcendental idealism. To understand what this fact has to do with Zizek's musing on being, nothingness, and the concept of less than nothing, we might start with Kant's refutation of the ontological argument for the existence of God. Here's how that argument usually goes. God is defined as a perfect being. Existence is better than non-existence. Therefore, to understand the concept of God is to understand that God exists. It is a tricky little argument, one that Kant refutes this way. Existence or being is not a real predicate, not something that can be added to a thing, but rather, existence is merely the positing of a thing in and of itself. So if we reread Hegel's opening of the Science of Logic, we can see that the being that Hegel is referring to is Kant's being, the being that is not a predicate, that cannot be added to our concept of an object, such as God. It is in itself an empty concept. When we posit the existence of God, we presuppose his existence not as a predicate, but as the very emptiness from which he could possibly appear. What Žižek would add to Hegel is the idea that this presupposition, this nothingness, isn't neutral, but is retroactively given a fictional quality. If we posit that God is a spaghetti monster, then the nothingness that we posit along with this monster is different than the sort of emptiness that we might imagine if we were to think of Yahweh arriving out of the formless void that was heaven and earth before he said, "Let there be light." Or to give a secular reading of this, we can turn to Zizek's own observation or joke about the difference between coffee without milk and coffee without cream. Moller-Nielsen asks who or what is supplementing reality by fiction, if less than nothing exists. Nobody is, or to put it differently, we are responsible for the fiction of ourselves.
Openness and how nature is hidden and so on approach us in a different way. Namely, what fascinates me immensely in quantum physics is this idea of ontologically incomplete universe. And I try to elaborate consequences of it. What do I mean by this? Not the simple idea, as it is usually misread, that we cannot ever know nature fully. Every idiot knows this. Quantum physics is much more radical. Look at if you know a little bit, now I will give you a little bit of my bluffing, you know. That's the difference between Heisenberg, the bad guy in this case, and Niels Bohr. Heisenberg basically reduces the uncertain principle to the limitation of our knowledge, while Bohr's point is, and that's so thrilling, that no, in themselves they don't have position and movement. You know, it's not our limitation, it's the unfinished character and now of reality itself. And now comes my joke, repeated 30 times in my books. I hope you don't know it. The idea how to read this came, I forgot the name, to a
Now, at this point, those of you who are friendly to Moller-Nielsen and disapproving of Žižek are probably thinking that I've just demonstrated that I'm a charlatan just like Žižek is. My answer would be that we've run up against a fundamental problem in philosophy today, and that nobody is free of the difficulty. Not Žižek, not Moller-Nielsen, not Steven Pinker, whom Moller-Nielsen quotes in his essay, and not even that most reasonable philosopher, Noam Chomsky.
Well, the two of us share something. I don't understand physics either, so we're in the same. And in fact, I don't think physicists understand it, and they're pretty open about it. But you see, you can't ask the question about interaction between physical and non-physical until you tell us what physical means. Okay, you've at least got to be able to tell us what physical means in order for the question to be answered. But there hasn't been any concept of physical for hundreds of years. There was one in the early scientific revolution, a very intuitive concept of the physical. That's what inspired Galileo, Descartes, Leibniz, Newton, Lagrange, many others all throughout the modern history of science. But it's been recognized, but it was already recognized after Newton that it's gone, like Locke recognized it, Hume recognized it. For Hume, it's not only gone, it's a total mystery beyond our intellectual capacities. And that we can speculate about, but it's certainly gone. And no one has proposed anything else. The physical these days are things that Newton would have regarded as total absurdities, like curved space-time. How can that be physical? Quantum entanglement. I mean, Einstein regarded that as non-physical because it's so absurd. But now scientists just accept it. Physical is just anything we more or less understand. And if that's the only notion of physical we have, there can't be interaction between physical and non-physical. Non-physical will be all the things we don't understand. If we ever get to understand them, they'll be physical.
The difference between Chomsky and Žižek on the question of the physical, or on materialism, or on nothing, is that while Chomsky holds that we are ultimately cut off from the physical world, that we can't even conceive of the physical in itself, but are stuck with an attempt to understand the categories or conditions of our cognition as best we can, Žižek is a materialist.
This vulgar metaphor that I hate, that our creation is like a painting. When we see a catastrophe, it is as if when you look at the picture and you look too close and you see only the stain, but from a proper distance you see that what appeared as a stain contributes to the harmony. Okay, I think that the lesson of Christianity, the materialist, this is for me the lesson of Christ, that we cannot afford this withdrawal. When we are confronting horrible things, I don't know, Holocaust, concentration camps, or other similar catastrophes, it's a little bit vulgar to say, yeah, this only appears to you as a catastrophe because of your limited perspective, withdraw back and you will see how it contributes to harmony or whatever, no? There is no big other. This is why I think this would be a kind of a more materialist reading, why Christ truly sacrificed himself. The message is no, all we can do is here. There is no father up there who takes care of it. So in a way, I think that it's the opposite. It's not trust God. No, God trusts us. All that can be done is we should do it. In this sense, with this incomplete notion of reality, it's also that we can, how to put it, it opens up, in this sense, the space for freedom. There is freedom only in an ontologically unfinished reality. So it was exactly 1 hour, that's what I wanted. Thank you very much.
The truth is that Žižek could be wrong. His philosophy could turn out to be a dead end, without that meaning that he is a charlatan. Further, I think there would still be something worthwhile in Žižek, even if he were to turn out to be ultimately wrong. The primary aim of Žižek's interventions is not to intervene electorally, nor is he hoping to shape people's held beliefs about this or that religion or political crisis. The main aim of Žižek's intellectual project is to encourage us to think, And when people of the left serve up ad hominem attacks against Žižek, when they throw everything they have at him, including misreadings and cherry-picked quotes, they not only do Žižek a disservice, but they also hurt our chances of developing a thoroughgoing refutation of Žižek's politics and philosophy. These sort of critics of Žižek should be considered the enemies of Žižek's true critics. Thanks for watching this Zero Books video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to this channel and click on the notifications bell so that you'll be alerted whenever we release a new video. You should also consider supporting us on Patreon. Our patrons get access to our Inside Zero Books podcast every week and can get access to the Zero Books Book Club and help us to continue making online content from the left.